Hi everyone, and welcome back to a new camera review by MirrorLessons. The product I'm talking about today has three names. It is called GX85 in North America, GX80 in Europe, and GX7 Mark II in Japan. You can also choose between Panasonic and Lumix or use both, so for the sake of clarity I'm going to refer to it as GX80. The Panasonic GX80 is the successor to the GX7, which was released almost 3 years ago, and it brings lots of improvements. Actually, it is one of Panasonic's most advanced Lumix cameras to date. Let's get started with the aspects I like the most. The GX80 is Panasonic's first camera with 5-axis sensor stabilization. It has long been a star feature on Olympus cameras, and recently Sony started to implement it in its A7 series. Now with the GX80, Panasonic has entered the game as well. The GX7 was actually the first Panasonic Micro Four Thirds camera to have sensor stabilization, but it only worked on 2 axes. For many years, Panasonic relied on the optical stabilization of its Lumix lenses. Then the GX8 was released last year with a 4-axis sensor and a system called Dual IS, where the camera combines both sensor and optical stabilization. The GX80 takes this technology to the next level, offering the best of both worlds: 5-axis stabilization and Dual IS. In my test, I found that Dual IS is especially effective with telephoto lenses. This is a shot taken with the Lumix 35-100mm f2.8 at almost 1 second of exposure handheld. This shot has the same angle of view of a 200mm lens on full frame, so the result is really impressive. With wide-angle lenses, the sensor stabilization alone does equally well in most situations. I didn't try every Lumix lens compatible with Dual IS, of course, but the good news is that the GX80 5-axis sensor stabilization works well with Olympus and other non-stabilized Micro Four Thirds lenses. You can even use it with adapted lenses, you just need to set the focal length manually. Image stabilization also works very well for video. I was able to compare its performance to the Pen F, which has the most recent hardware of Olympus cameras. The GX80 stabilization isn't quite as effective, but it does produce less distortion than the Olympus camera. Dual IS is once again effective with telephoto lenses and for static shots. For panning, however, it can be jerky. If you are interested to know more, you can watch our in-depth comparison between these two cameras with lots of examples. Panasonic is the brand that has been pushing 4K from the very beginning, and the GX80 doesn't disappoint. The 4K quality is excellent with full pixel readout, so there isn't any aliasing or moire. The footage is sharp and very usable up to 3200 ISO. The highest sensitivity available is 6400. The only downside is rolling shutter, and as you can see, it is quite evident. What I love about Lumix cameras is that they are packed with a lot of extra options. You get stop-motion animation, time-lapse, and even some unique 4K features like 4K live cropping. Basically, the camera allows you to create digital movements by cropping the 4K resolution and saving the file in Full HD. I use it for some of our upcoming YouTube videos and it can be quite useful. Here as well you can see our dedicated video about 4K live cropping. You also have all the options related to 4K photo, which allows you to save an 8-megapixel JPEG from 4K video footage. This includes 4K burst at 30 frames per second, post-focus where you select your focus point after taking the shot, and light composition. The latter is the only small disappointment. When using this mode you need high ISOs because you are shooting in low light. Being limited to an 8 megapixel JPEG that is saved from compressed video footage means you don't have lots of room for post-processing and better image quality. The Live Composite feature on Olympus cameras, for example, allows you to save a RAW file in full resolution. I would have preferred this to be a complete stills feature rather than a 4K photo feature. The camera has a good number of extra functionalities. I already mentioned 4K photo, but other things worth listing are multiple exposure, panorama, Wi-Fi capabilities, exposure and aperture bracketing, and focus bracketing, which is a new addition. The camera will automatically change the focus point between shots. You can take up to 999 shots in both RAW and JPEG and in steps from 1 to 5. These steps are there to tell the camera how much distance you want between each focus point. It doesn't merge the images in cameras, you'll have to use a dedicated software such as Photoshop or Helicon Focus. Unlike Olympus cameras, the GX80 takes a series of shots in front of and behind the focus point you selected, and it does so in an alternating pattern. This means that you should begin by focusing at the center of the object you are photographing rather than at the shortest distance. For this reason, choosing the best initial focus point can take some getting used to. The GX80 has an excellent continuous shooting speed and buffer. It can shoot up to 8 frames per second and the burst lasts for 8 seconds with RAW plus JPEG. With JPEG only, it never stops shooting. With the electronic shutter, the camera can shoot up to 40 frames per second with JPEG at a reduced size of 2 megapixels. The electronic shutter also allows you to shoot at faster shutter speed of 1/16,000th of a second and in silent mode. Speaking of the shutter, the GX80 introduces a new mechanical shutter with an electromagnetic drive to reduce shutter shock, an issue that has been reported on the GX7 and GX8 especially. During my 3 weeks of testing, I never encountered any shutter shock issues. Plus, the shutter sound is very quiet and pleasant. The GX80 uses the depth from the focus technology seen in the GH4, G7 and GX8. It is a contrast detection autofocus system capable of selecting the correct focus point by analyzing 2 images with different depth of field. I always have mixed feelings about depth from the focus. It proved to be fast on the GH4, but it was a little disappointing on the GX8, especially with fast-moving subjects, backlight and other situations where there isn't enough contrast. On the GX80, I admit I got good results even in a sports environment with a keeper rate of approximately 65%. It locks quickly, tracks well, but can sometimes miss focus completely, and it doesn't always deliver constant performance. The performance can also vary depending on the lens used. For example, here I could have easily set my focus and locked it. Because the scene is large, I am shooting at 9mm f5.6, so everything is in focus really. But still, it's interesting to note how with continuous AF, a bunch of these images were out of focus, for no particular reason. For video, the performance is lower even with Lumix lenses. The performance in low light decreases but remains good and usable in single autofocus. You can take advantage of the touchscreen to customize the AF area, and there are a lot of useful options. The AF works well in the 49 area mode. The only feature that has room for improvement is AF tracking, and I found that face and eye detection behave too randomly. The GX80 has a new sensor. The resolution is still the same, 16 megapixels, but it lacks the anti-aliasing filter. Panasonic claims that the new sensor has 10% more sharpness than the previous 60 megapixel sensors. Now, I ran some side-by-side tests with the GX7, and to be honest, I don't really see any differences. It really takes very fine textures to notice something, but frankly, 99.9% of the time it doesn't make a difference. So the image quality of this camera is up to the standard of the most recent Micro Four Thirds cameras. It has good dynamic range with some limits for heavy post-production and good ISO performance up to 6400. The color profiles are not my favorite, but with a few adjustments they can work well. The new L monochrome profile is not bad and gives you more contrast in comparison to the standard monochrome profile. The only real disappointment I have with this camera is that it lacks a few things concerning the ergonomics and usability that are present on the GX7, and I don't really understand why they aren't on the GX80 as well. Of course, if you never tried the GX7, this chapter might not interest you. Having owned and loved the GX7 myself, I simply don't understand these downgrades. For example, the grip is smaller and less comfortable than the one on the GX7, whose grip was more rounded and prominent. It was especially helpful with telephoto lenses. The electronic viewfinder is exactly the same and is based on field sequential technology. It gives you the perception of more resolution, but it can produce a rainbow effect when panning quickly against a scene with strong contrast or backlight. However, it cannot be tilted like the one on the GX7. Now, to me this is a big letdown because the tilting EVF was a unique feature of the GX series. I personally love this feature, and since the EVF is exactly the same in terms of specification and size, and the camera body has a similar design, Panasonic should have kept it. Another complaint is that the rear autofocus manual focus selector that is on the GX7 has disappeared from the GX80. This is a feature I love on all Panasonic cameras, especially when shooting video. Again, there is no apparent reason why it shouldn't be there. The built-in flash is another example. On the GX7 it can control other compatible units wirelessly. The GX80 isn't able to do this. You need an external unit like the FR200L. I realize I'm nitpicking here, but if Panasonic had kept these options on the GX80 as well, for me the camera would be almost perfect. The design is nice, small and light. There are several custom buttons and all the dials except for the rear dial are comfortable. The body is mostly made of plastic and isn't weather sealed, but I guess this was done to keep the cost down and make the camera more affordable. Speaking of affordability, I kept the aspect I like the most for the end, and here it is. This is one of the best deals on a micro four thirds camera or even a mirrorless cameras that you can find today. For $800 or €800 or £700 approximately with the kit lens, you get all the best features you can find in a mirrorless camera. Good image quality, excellent image stabilization that uses both sensor and optical stabilization, excellent 4K video, tons of extra features including 4K photo, focus bracketing, 4K live cropping, etc., tilting and touchscreen, and a compact size. Panasonic was smart to make the camera so affordable without compromising on quality, performance or advanced technology. Not everything is perfect, but to be honest, I had a hard time finding real flaws about this camera, and truth is, there aren't many. In fact, my only real disappointment is that a few features I liked on the GX7 have been removed from the GX80. Right now, especially for someone who wants to buy their first mirrorless camera without spending a lot, I can't think of any better deal. As usual, thank you for watching. If you have any questions, don't hesitate to leave a comment below. Please like the video, subscribe, and make sure to follow us. Other camera reviews are coming soon. Bye bye!